I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles, and I went to college, not that far from the Women's Building, to Occidental College, and I was a chemistry pre-med major. There were two things that I needed to address. One was my sexual identity, which had started to waver a bit. The other was to try to figure out how I could end up doing something other than science and chemistry and medicine. I didn't know that the Women's Building had such an extensive graphics program and a studio and classes, but once I got there, I did find that out, and so I took full advantage of that. First, I started by taking classes in the studio. I took classes taught by Susan King and Cindy Marsh, and I'm forever grateful for to them and for those classes. From them, I learned or expanded my knowledge of letterpress printing, artist bookmaking, silkscreen printing, and offset press work. I had actually taken a print shop class in high school, and I was the only female in that class. I was allowed to do everything except operate the machinery. So one of the great things about the Women's Building was that once you took a class and knew how to operate the equipment, you could run any press. So that was wonderful, and I did print extensively there. In Cindy Marsh's class, I loved it because she was such a renegade. She taught us actually, how to do it, but then she really encouraged us to mess it all up, to really, draw it outside the lines and experiment and then see what happens. So, you might get a magenta plate but run cyan, or do exposures much longer than typical, and run stuff backwards through the press, or run it through twice. It was just kind of wild. The environment was very nurturing and very accepting of anybody, however they came, and whatever their background was, whatever content they wanted to include. I felt very fortified and very fine to be who I was in every regard. Asian, lesbian, female, designer, artist. It was a complete launching pad for all of that. And I guess it was pretty clear that I liked what I was doing and that I could take it further. So I actually got hired by Susan King and separately Cindy Marsh to work in their own studios to help them. There was also, because I worked different jobs each day of the week, there's also the Women's Graphics Center, which was attached to the studio and to the Women's Building, and that was a money-making endeavor. We did typesetting and design and some printing, and I got a job there too, typesetting. So sometimes Sheila, who founded WGC, she would send in her work to be typeset. My first face-on experience with her was I learned that she was giving a talk at the Pacific Design Center on graphic design. So I went to that. It was an evening talk, and it was prescribed amount of time, like an hour and a half or something, but I was very much impressed with her fluid articulation and how much subject matter she covered in such a short time, and also the depth of it and her particular insight. I was very awed by her. So it kind of put me back on that road on the redo road, which is what I sometimes call that time at the Women's Building. I was on a particular path before, which was a standard path, and then once I discovered the Women's Building, it helped me go off-road and discover and carve out a different path that was a complete surprise to me. So I miss the FSW days. Not that I would have necessarily enrolled, I probably would have been too chicken, but but I grabbed a tail end of something, and I still end up like benefiting fully from what it had to offer, even though I suppose I made up my own curriculum, or I made it, you know, serve me. As an indirect result of having made friends with Cindy Marsh and Susan King, and Cindy's husband, Mike Fink, who's a graphic designer that I very much admire, I learned about a job at EMI Records, so I applied to be a graphic designer there. And you know, to do that, you have to show a portfolio, which I did. And I have to say that, you know, it was all legitimate work that I had designed, but but honestly, a lot of it had been printed at the Women's Building. So, so that was kind of a great outcome. I feel that the sensibility of the Women's Building was that it wasn't about necessarily how can I make my situation better? How can I ascend and go places? It was, how can we make things better for all of us? It was very group effort, even though there's a lot of friction and fighting and different ideas. But, you know, it was, let's say it's a slow progression, but it was like as a mass, as a body. And so it wasn't wildly, even though it tolerated individualism for sure, it wasn't all about aggrandizing a single person. And so I think the way, and also, you know, there's public art, there's outreach, there's education, there's you know, inclusion. And I think that these sorts of values I took into into the workplace. I think that, you know, when I got into management at a different record company, I think some of those same values were part of what drove me. And so that my some of the things that I'm most proud of are mentoring some of the younger designers coming up, and also the designers of color, which were actually hard to find, and who sometimes had trouble reading the corporate signals of, you know, what's acceptable or what you should be doing, and so I try to help them with that. Also, I was on the diversity committee, and I was kind of keen to get same-sex domestic partner benefits in place at Sony Music, which we did achieve, and I was really happy about that. That was in 1999 or so. But anyway, we've come a long ways since then, and I'm glad for that. But that was a lovely moment for me. The Women's Building gave me everything that I needed to live. I'm not saying that facetiously. It set me off on a career path. It set me up with my spouse. And I have lifelong friends. You know, this was completely, it was all unconscious, and it wasn't, you know, designed or I sought. It was accidental, and I stumbled into it, and I just got really lucky.